Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've been formulating questions, because you're going to get a quick blah blah from me, and then we're going to have HP, Cisco, Brocade and Alcatel-Lucent give you a 1-minute pitch about why they're the best. And then we're going to ask you to vote as to who do you think actually convince you to spend hard-earned dollars on a whole bunch of kit and consulting and all those expensive things that they're all going to charge us to do. Analyst firms never overcharge, it's just the vendors I'd like to point out. These are the things that organisations tell us are important from a business perspective. But you can see up there to your left, what are they looking to do around the data centres and the taking of cost out of their business? They're looking at data centre transformation, virtualisation, cloud to a certain extent. And then you have these things in the middle, which is the alignment of IT in the business. So they're looking at all these things about metrics, collaboration. How do I link my IT to the business architectures? How do I make that work properly? Because I'm going to save a lot of cost over here. I'm going to change my infrastructure environment, whether I go cloud or I look to a data center solution. Could be one and the same. You have this middle ground, and then you have these things over here, this risk management, compliance, governance, security. So they're sort of the top of mind issues that organizations across AP have said to us, that when they're starting to look at their infrastructure environment, these are the things that the vendors need to hit, need to convince us on from a buyer's perspective. You've got these things up there in terms of the IT side of the business is looking at the design, the energy efficiency, utilization. From the business perspective though, my CFO is going to be talking to me about sustainability, about things around the CapEx and OpEx, what can I do around that to make it a little bit more amenable for my business. So you've got these two balancing points. One is actually potentially very expensive, and then you have to look at, well, I've got this infrastructure in place, how do I optimize it? What can I do around the management? You look at the cost of what organizations spend and save around server virtualization, and then look at the expensive costs that they incur around the management of that environment, and you begin to wonder whether they're actually saving any money. And I spoke to one organization last year who had heavily virtualized their architecture over 3 years and been running it for about 6 months, and came to us and said, how do we go back to a physical environment? I don't want to go logical anymore. So 3.5 years of business case wasted because they weren't saving any money. The GFC for many organizations has fundamentally changed the way businesses look at their asset base. So one more bill. And it has significantly altered. And it's altered on the basis that it is no longer a CIO, in some parts, CIO-driven decision. CIOs are at risk of being marginalized. These decisions are now, more often than not, coming from a CFO perspective. So where these business decisions around virtualization, moving to a data center, to a cloud environment occur, may not be in the IT group. It may actually be in the CFO's office, or it could be somewhere else, depending on who has that control.
Network infrastructure. That's the question. What is the network infrastructure? Is it ready for today, and will it support future needs? And the answer that I'll be taking is, just look at what IP networks have been doing for the last 10 or so years. But really there's 5 key topics that I want you to think about. And it's about carrier grade. And the first thing is, we've been doing this for the last 10 years, building carrier grade networks. Multi-tenancy. We've been doing VPNs and separating services across networks now for the better part of 10 years. This is effectively what the data center is doing, virtualizing networks. Network-wide, we cannot have a data center as a standalone island. Mobility of resources is extremely important, and as John McHugh said earlier on, resources will move around the network. So therefore you need a network-wide plot. You need agile services. The network needs to understand that resources have moved, and it needs to turn on policies on and off in real time. And lastly, we've seen a lot of solutions come out to the market based on proprietary solutions. You want to look at open standards. You want to look at where industry is going and look at open standards so you can interoperate as you federate data center together. So at Alcatel-Lucent, we have a solution that covers all these 5 key points. We've been doing this for the last 5 to 10 years in the network transformation space and longer before that. And we have a real good view, as we believe data center networks are really a micro view of what IP and MPLS networks have been doing for the past 10 or so years. Thank you.
Next slide. There's no such thing as a single vendor network data center, and there's never going to be. The solution that customers are going to need is going to be open. It's going to be multi-vendor. It's going to support the utilization of the millions of dollars of legacy equipment. Not just utilization, but incorporation of it into the long-range vision. It's going to inherently simplify the deployment of the business applications that customers need in the local data center and throughout the cloud. And the one thing that it's got to step up to that Ethernet has never truly embraced, and now is the time for it to happen, is it's got to be non-stop. Like the data center, like the resources in a great data center, it's got to achieve resiliency without redundancy and be exceptional at that. And that's what I think Brocade's solution is based upon. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring Cisco to the stage. Apparently they do something with networking.
Thank you, Tim. Cisco has a culture of innovation, and we've been innovating in networks for the last 25 years. 4 years ago, we announced our data center architecture with a goal to maximize business advantage for a customer's investment in their data center. Next slide, please. Our data center architecture, it targets IT service agility and delivering IT service agility through business and technology innovation. That's based on the network platform. Aside from technology, we are creating the cloud market, the cloud industry, by innovating on the supply side of the market and the demand side of the market. On the supply side, we're creating business models, we're creating services to be delivered over the cloud. On the demand side, we're working with organizations to take an IT as a service approach and look at their IT services, whether they're delivering those services by building them, buying them, renting them, or leasing them. We continue to take a customer-led approach by having an open interoperability architecture based on new IT ecosystem paradigm and also driving the standards bodies. In short, we are architecting infrastructure to deliver enterprise-grade IT services from the virtual workload that's hosted in the data center all the way to the service consumption point on the user device. Thank you.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, last pitch for the day. Steve Deitch from HP, a company that is probably more known for its infrastructure than perhaps some of the others.
It's about agility, it's about speed, it's about services-based, it's about innovation, scalability, and creating resource pools, because that's really what the cloud is about, right? Today's data center architectures do not fit the bill. They're fragmented, they're siloed, there's islands of IT, they're expensive, they're complex. Most companies will spend 70 to 80% of their costs on keeping the lights on from an operational perspective. They'll spend 30 innovating and driving customers along that maturity curve from virtualization to the cloud. From an HP point of view perspective, we believe the solution to fixing that from a data center and enabling the cloud is around converged infrastructure, bringing those islands or fragmented stacks back together again. We're at an inflection point. Servers, storage, networking, power and cooling, facilities management, all wrapped with heterogeneous management. HP is the only vendor on the planet that brings server, storage, networking, power and cooling, facilities management, and unified management capabilities based on our own intellectual property, integrated design, but maintains openness, flexibility, and gives customers choice. Layer on top of that, automation and orchestration, end-to-end application to infrastructure lifecycle. Remember, it's about the application and the service. Don't let anybody tell you anything else. That's what the end user wants. It has nothing to do with the underlying infrastructure. It's the application. Layer that on, security, and you have the answer, the data center of the future, delivered today. Thank you.
So, who got the audience's vote? The full transcript of this session, together with the presentation slides, can be downloaded from the NetEvents website, www.netevents.org. And that includes the full question and answer session that followed. Here's just a taster of the Q&A.
Right now, you're really talking about selling to enterprise. Now, did you guys have a somewhat? I want to hear your strategy or your opinion on whether or not you're targeting the communication service providers, as they transition into a more of a cloud service provider.
How do you sell cloud to the telcos?
Want me to take that? So when we look at the cloud, we look at it from three perspectives, three market segments. One being the you can think about it from a small, medium business perspective as a consumer of the cloud, and some might build their own clouds from if they're a larger, small, medium business. Enterprise service providers, which you would traditionally think of as the AT&Ts, the Singtels, the BTs of the world. And then the third group we call, for lack of a better term, independent clouds. Think of these as the uber-duber clouds that do one thing really, really well, like Facebook, Google, and everything. And they have completely different requirements than an AT&T that's trying to deliver 1,000 cloud services to an enterprise and small, medium business market. We are directly providing solutions, the first two groups being enterprise and the service providers, with the same fundamental platform to deliver services, whether it be private, public, or hybrid. For the large independent cloud providers, we provide technology that specifically fits them, which could be very, very different than AT&T and Google. For instance, Google's 95% physical. They don't virtualize much at all. A very different model, and they are looking for very, very scalable, for all lack of a better word, cost-efficient products with white glove supply chain engagement, which is another aspect of the business model. So we do look at the three very, very differently.
Remember, the full transcript of this session, together with the presentation slides, can be downloaded from the NetEvents website, www.netevents.org. And that includes the full question and answer session.